We're an umbrella body and we bring together organisations who work with children right across the spectrum. So we're ideally placed to bring together examples of where they're doing it really well and to get them to create a space where people can talk to each other and share what's working really well in terms of provision.
Transition presents us particular issues for children and young people on the autism spectrum, and most practitioners who work with children and young people with autism are aware of that, but there is developing good practice in how we should support people across key times of transition, from early years provision into primary school, from primary into secondary school, and perhaps most difficultly the big transition from children and school life into adult life is a particularly challenging time for many children and young people with autism. So today we're very pleased to be able to bring together some well-respected best practitioners in the areas of transition, including the Transition Support Programme from the Council for Disabled Children, to help enhance the practice that will already be existing amongst our delegates today.
The government have committed £19 million, which is going out to local authorities to support them to improve basic support for transition through a set of minimum standards, which are based on statutory duties, guidance, and then good practice and innovation as well. So for all disabled young people, the idea is that you have a transition plan, that you have a transition review when you're supposed to, that people who are from the different professions support you to look at different life options and life chances, and that you're empowered to make that choice.
It's about sharing good practice, and I kind of think that if you look at the national picture of what's going on in transition, it's a very exciting time. £19 million is going into transitions work. The national support team is actually in place, and I think it's about regions within the localities actually disseminating good practice, but the top and bottom of it is practitioners are actually involved in hands-on grassroots work, being invited to those meetings and those seminars where they can share good practice and talk about what benefits have come out of their work and how they can share those benefits with other local authority workers. So it's really about sharing good practice and good networking, but not just coming and talking shop and going away, but really hands-on strategies and techniques that you need, like the toolkit, for example, that we're developing in Mansfield area in North Nottingham. We would like to share that within Lincolnshire, within Leicestershire, all over the country really, to say, hey, these are the kind of things that we're involved in. We want to share those with you.
So the programme really isn't working directly with families and young people in terms of supporting them. It's working with them to make sure we get their views, and then we take those views back into the local authorities and the primary care trusts and all their partner agencies and their voluntary sector agencies that they commission to provide these services, and look at what is it you're doing to make sure this young person has the right support to move on. Is it that you need us to support you to bring the agencies together to decide how they work? Is it that you need support to understand more about the role of commissioning and how we can make that better? Really one of the things to say is there's lots and lots of good practice around the country, and we're trying to learn from that and make sure that other areas learn from that as well, so that those areas that really struggle with some of the kind of bigger issues, like multi-agency working, like moving forward with personalisation and those kind of issues, have the support they need.
I think transition for all children is a difficult time and can be very stressful for parents. But for children on the spectrum, I think that brings with it additional pressures. Mainly, it's hoping that people who they're going to meet as they do transition have that understanding about their underlying difficulties, and also trying to allay the fear that all parents have, but in particular parents of children on the spectrum.
Unfortunately, just going to a large secondary school, being taken away from everything that he knew, everything that was familiar to him, led to him ultimately having a nervous breakdown at the end of Y7. And that was extremely difficult for us because it led to a period of him not being in school at all. And, obviously that meant that I was working at the time and I had to give up my job temporarily to be at home with him to support him. Also found it very difficult to get the correct sort of interventions from the local CAMS service. We were put on a waiting list, and, at this time he became very aggressive and self-harming. This impacted on the whole of us as a family.
I found it very difficult going from a situation where you basically had one teacher for a year to in a situation where every hour the teacher changed. Obviously every teacher has a different teaching style, there are a different set of rules in every classroom, and it's really hard to adjust when you're also struggling socially and struggling to make sense of the world, to then adjust to the fact that suddenly from a position where it's really secure and you're with the same class and the same group of people all the time, you're in a situation where suddenly everything changes pretty much every minute almost. It's really hard to cope with, and that's kind of what happened to me. I was bullied because obviously I was different and I was struggling, and that really continued throughout my time at secondary school.
The key thing that I think we would see would be anxiety. But anxiety presents itself in different ways in different children. And in some children, within the school situation, you might not even notice that the child's anxious, but the parents will notice when the kid comes home from school, and we'll see all sorts of difficulties at that point. So it's about making changes as predictable as you can in a way that the youngster understands, and that means you've got to take account of that child's own understanding level of communication, so that you can pitch your explanation of the changes that are about to happen at the right level. Because it's not change itself that worries young people on the spectrum. It's not knowing how to predict that change is going to happen, and not having strategies to help calm yourself, or people to support you in calming yourself when changes sometimes inevitably happen out of the blue.
I was actually became quite seriously mentally ill around the time of transition, which is quite common actually for a lot of people with an ASD to develop a mental health problem around sort of age of 16, because of the difficulties of transition and the fact that you're moving from school, which is very sort of regimented and very controlled, into the adult world, which is much freer and where there's much more choice and much more opportunities to get things wrong. And obviously I found that even more difficult to cope with than most people with an ASD, and I was actually admitted to a psychiatric unit at one point for a few months to help me recover and try and make sense of what was going on.
Whether it's parents, professionals, whoever, local authority managers, being able to use what we would call an autism lens, to be able to see the world as the young person sees the world. Because in doing that, if you're understanding the world as they see it, you're able to then anticipate the types of things that are going to cause the anxiety. And once you've anticipated, you can then put things in place that help them through that.
We have been trying to develop new creative ways of engagement with young people. And our work is deeply rooted in person-centred thinking and person-centred planning. And one of the main tools we use within the person-centred toolkit is the drum. We drum with young people, we use rhythms. The project that I've been involved in for the last few years is called the Science of Rhythm. And essentially we use vocalization of rhythm, and through vocalizing rhythm and then transferring those rhythms onto the drum, young people begin to engage with us. And we found this approach incredibly participatory, but also it is totally empowering, because there's no right or wrong way of playing the drum. The drums that we use are the West African djembe, and essentially 3 notes come off that drum: bass, tone, slap. And those 3 notes then actually create a huge repertoire of rhythms, which young people find that they have enormous fun in creating those rhythms, but also in doing so, they are involved in some real essential life skills work around working together, eye contact, around cooperation, negotiating, communication, which are very important in life. So drumming then becomes secondary, and the focus around developing key life skills become a primary focus for us in the process.
I think one of the key things is to try and ensure that teachers don't think that just because a child appears to be coping reasonably well on the outset, it actually doesn't necessarily mean that inside they're coping. I think it's very easy for teachers and for teaching professionals to try and stop people who are obviously badly behaved from doing that and try and help them, but actually I think more help needs to be given to the people like me who were quiet, who actually did get on with the work when they could and when their anxieties allowed them. And actually it would be helpful if teachers could see that in many ways those are the people that actually need most help, because no one's picking up on the difficulties they're having.